The concept of dive watches are built upon the framework of maximized utility, as by their very nature they need to be able to take on the rough conditions of aquatic exploration. But this very concept of being able to take on a beating might cause many to question, why spend more for a dive watch in the first place? So to answer that question, we look at 3 leading heritage-inspired dive watches in this video for their respective segments, and then call out what you get as you start to move up in price. Specifically, we're going to look at the Seiko SPB143, the Tudor Black Bay, and the Glashütte Original SeaQ. And before we jump into this video taking a look at these 3 dive watches, I'd recommend, if you love all things dive watches, want a good jumping off point for your research, looking at our 57 best dive watches for 2023, full in-depth article, deep dive on some of the watches, general points that you should consider when looking to buy, and then also getting some nice imagery in the process to just kind of get lost in. So if you want more information about dive watches, want to see what's available to you in the wider market, I recommend checking out that article in the description down below. So recommend checking it out after this video. So please keep in mind that this is not intended to be a full in-depth review of these watches. We have full in-depth reviews looking at these watches, but really instead looking at what you are specifically going to get as you start going up in price. And it really gets into the details as you start to ascend here. So that's really what I'm focusing on for this video. Now, starting with the least expensive watch on our list, we have the SPB143 from the more elevated tier known as the Luxe Collection from Seiko. Now, coming in at the steep for the brand, $1,200, the 143 was released back in 2020 and takes its design inspiration from the iconic 62 Moss diver released back in 1965. In other words, representing the most wearable dive watch in Seiko's modern collection, coming in at 40.5 millimeters in diameter, 47.6 millimeters lug to lug, and a relatively svelte 13.2 millimeters thick, in totality wearing more like a 39 millimeter on wrist. Now, compared to what you get from other Seiko Prospex divers priced between $500 and $1,000, the 143 provides a noticeable jump up in level of finishing and attention to detail. Just to call out a few areas where this will primarily be felt, we have the raised indices with refined steel perimeters housing the lume, which shines remarkably. The hands have a subtle facet and are vertically brushed, which can only be seen at certain angles under the light if you get very close, something you won't see with entry-level Seiko watches. And finally, the big jump from the conventional Seiko models and representing what a $1,000 dive watch will most likely deliver is the case, which candidly is not the best that you will find in the price range compared to Swiss options, but its subtle hits of polish and facets on the case elements help tell the story, all while including Seiko's super hard coating to help at least some degree with scratches. But the rest leaves us with some of the attributes that lead to why this watch is the most inexpensive of the 3 we're looking at. The bracelet, although better than many, is pin adjusted and stamped with some of its components, with a clasp and diver extension not feeling as refined as other watches as you ascend in price. The 6R35 movement, despite being a venerable option, it is not class leading in this segment and probably serves as the leading area of improvement as we ascend up here to the next tier. The 70-hour power reserve is quite good, but this is the only 3 Hz movement on the list, a beat frequency that is slower than the pervasive ETA or Sellita calibers found in this price segment quite frequently. But the most notable point for the movement has to be the quoted accuracy, with Seiko quoting -15 to +25 seconds a day, by far the widest range of deviation for a watch on this list. These small criticisms don't take much away from this watch being a leader in this $1,000 price tier, as I to this day am still very tempted to add one of these to my collection, but they are important to call out as we highlight our next jump up in the trio here, the Tudor Black Bay. So the Tudor Black Bay has been one of the great success stories of watchmaking in the past decade, now falling right near $4,000 for a bracelet option. But what exactly are you getting when you pay 3 to 4 times the price of the previous SPB143? As anything, there are diminishing returns. However, when you get this watch in hand, the differences are rather clear. First, the Black Bay offers a substantial step up with its bracelet and clasp, which not only look the part, but feel the part. The bracelet features screwed-in links, which although are not inherently better per se if pin links are done right, they do require more detail in their manufacturing. The clasp in this case is milled from solid stainless steel, has a refined fold-over locking system, and has ceramic pins in the clasp to counteract the adverse effects of friction wearing down on the locking clasp over time. Although it's not present in all Black Bay models, it is important to mention the T-fit for some on-the-fly micro adjustment, truly class leading for this segment. Now the case itself has sharper lines of polish, specifically the hairline bevel. The bezel action is more responsive and precise, although the insert strongly leans into the heritage approach approach with its aluminum, and in some ways, the previous Seiko might actually look more three-dimensional, so good nod there for the SPB. The crystal doming is more pronounced and integrated cleanly with the interior elements of the watch. The dial, primarily the hands and markers, have steel perimeters that are more distinct in their separation from the lume-filled areas, and the hands have sharper and more detailed edges than what we saw previously at the $1,000 tier. But the biggest reason for the step up in perceived quality is actually not visible, and that is the MT movement on the inside of these watches. Now, these movements are able to equal the length of power reserve of Seiko while operating at a beat frequency of 4 Hz. In addition, the calibers also utilize a free-sprung architecture that assists in ensuring optimal accuracy once regulating appropriately at the factory, and doesn't run the same risk of regulating pins getting knocked and throwing off the timekeeping. In tandem with this, the movement is COSC certified, meaning it passes the protocol to meet the -4 to +6 standard of accuracy required to be a Swiss chronometer, and has up components such as a silicone hairspring to combat the negative effects of magnetism on timekeeping. So the Tudor in many ways delivers on many of the areas one would look for a luxury timepiece. But say you have a higher budget, say you're willing to spend $10,000. What exactly are you getting with that significant jump up? To help us answer that question, we bring in the help of the Glashütte Original SeaQ. Now, the SeaQ descends from the rich history of watchmaking in Glashütte, a small horological powerhouse of a town that famously houses some of the best brands in Germany. Based on a rare vintage diver produced by the GUB, GO's pre-Cold War predecessor, the SeaQ is a piece that combines dive watch utility with specialized touches of elegance that makes GO a slept-on leader in the pricing arena. Now, to call out some of the notable jumps in quality, first, we have to start with the case finish. Although the polished bevel spanning the case is not as eye-catching from the front as the Tudor, the SeaQ showcases a much wider array of surface finishes. The anterior angles have a circular graining pattern to the brushing before it is broken up abruptly yet precisely by the polished bevel with vertical brushing on the case sides. The bezel is well constructed and contains a polished ceramic insert that does look the part, with the dial containing raised elements throughout while also containing unorthodox lume-filled numerals, which despite shining the least of the three, still is solid in practice. Also keep in mind the increased difficulty of not only cutting the steel frames housing the lume, but the lume itself must fit the shape of those numerals. Now, this is all done on a dial that is executed in a remarkable sunray finish that requires a brass blank and is meticulously polished and includes an added liquid that creates this glossy sheen. Now, the bracelet is the most elegant of the 3 options so far and has one of the niftiest integrations of on-the-fly adjustment in the industry, with the push-button GO logo for that extension. The case back, although closed in the mid-size version, is far and away the most intricate, with its engraved trident logo with recessed blasted areas for descriptive text, a theme that is followed with the sign crown. In the larger pano date configuration though, the case back is open, which, speaking of that pano date, this is a proprietary date mechanism that utilizes 2 date wheels, one for each numeral, and from what I've heard, this is actually a bit of a point of envy around the streets of Glashütte, given how seamlessly it operates, just saying. However, without question, the biggest reason for the SeaQ's position is with the movement, as it is substantially, and I mean substantially, the best finished movement of the trio by a country mile, and arguably one of the best of any dive watches in the world of watchmaking. Now, since the movement is only on display in the Panadate version, we can call attention to the 3613 caliber, a manufacturer movement where the devil is in the details. First, the movement looks the part, offering a 21 karat gold oscillating weight, which is also hollowed out with the GO logo. Each interior angle of the GO logo is also going to be beveled and polished independently by a watchmaker, a concept that is going to be foreign to the previous 2 watches that are going to be more of an industrial process. But just keep in mind, each one of those angles going to be beveled. Now, the central bridges feature Glashütte ribbing with a sunray finish grain at the movement's outskirts. Many of the components feature snailing on their surfaces and employs the help of heat-blued screws, which require an artisan to have an exact exposure of heat to the screws in order for them to have the correct shade of blue. The balance architecture is of a free-sprung variety, utilizing inertia balance screws for fine-tune adjustment, but in addition has a swan neck regulating organ to go along with it. Now, the movement beats away at 4 Hz while still lasting the longest in the power reserve department, in this instance lasting for 100 hours. The cased up movement testing standards are just as stringent as the finishing standards, as this watch is going to undergo 28 days days of testing to ensure precise timekeeping, testing at 6 positions, one more than the standard of COSC tests, while upholding the strict accuracy standards of -4 to +6 seconds a day. And even after passing that test, the watch also undergoes a strict water, condensation test, and temperature test, fulfilling on the stereotypical excellent German engineering standards. So just to unpack here, it's very clear that as you go up, there are sometimes diminishing returns. But as you go up also in price, the details are there, and many of these details are not going to necessarily be felt in the day-to-day. So for some, they might rationalize it might not being worth it. But as somebody who's seen a lot of these just high-level watches being produced on either assembly line or seeing an individual artisan actually assembling some of these movements, you get a better sense of what is going into these watches. Some of the fine details, all of these components being put together, and some of them in a case of GO being finished independently, are really what you're paying for as you go up. And in addition, in this case, you're also getting that extended power reserve, some of the extra movement tech that you'd like to see. So that's really what you're starting to pay for. Now, whether or not these are gonna be things that you value, you care about, and whether or not you can afford them is totally up to you. You have to go out of your way to really prioritize rationalizing a dive watch being worth this amount of money being something that you want to go for. But what I really wanted to do with this video is try to showcase what are those specific details that might just be lost as you're just looking at a product page on a website or maybe trying on a watch really quickly in a store. Of course, really what matters the most is, do you love it? But knowing more of the details behind what makes the watch special, I think is very important when trying to make a buying decision. But all right, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. I know this whole world of watchmaking is kind of just crazy at times, and it's hard to rationalize spending more for a certain watch compared to another. But if this was helpful and it helped kind of put some context into what you're getting as you go up, let me know in the comments down below, and I'd be happy to do this more in the future, maybe looking at some different watches, some different tiers, different types. If that is of interest to you, just let me know in the comments down below. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.